Hi, my name is Trevor Manuel. I'm the chairperson of the National Planning Commission in South Africa. This is the first planning commission we've had in the country. It was set up by President Zuma and inaugurated in May of 2010. The President invited the Planning Commission to take an independent and critical view of South Africa and use this to produce a vision and a plan focused on the detail of a much better quality of life for all by 2030. The Commission is made up of 26 commissioners. 25 are private citizens who serve in their part-time capacities, and I'm a cabinet minister and the only full-time commissioner. Our first task was to get a clear picture of where we are as a country. The Commission wrote a diagnostic report which we shared with the country in June of this year. The feedback from this is that we've done a good job describing the problems that face us as a nation. I'm going to talk about what we find in a bit more detail shortly. The second task that we've been set is to draw up a vision and a plan that will take us to 2030. Our focus is on eliminating poverty and reducing inequality. I want to emphasize that. We have to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality, because we believe that these are the two biggest problems that face us as a country, and because these problems are so big, they affect everything else. So let me share our findings with you in the diagnostic report. We identified 9 big challenges that we think are the most urgent. These were poor educational outcomes. Secondly, too few South Africans are employed. Thirdly, the country has a very high disease burden. Fourthly, we are still a divided society. Fifth, public services often fail the poor. And there are parts of the country where people are locked into poverty where they live. Infrastructure is crumbling. And we do not use our natural resources such as land and water well. And we release too much carbon into the atmosphere. Corruption bedevils everything we do. And I'm going to talk about each of these in a little more detail. If you start with education, which is the basis of everything, we have some things we need to be thankful for. 80% of learners aged 5 are enrolled at school. That looks good. But digging deeper, we see that the shadow of history as defined by race and class is still very evident in our educational system. Only 1% of African schools are top performing, 12% are moderately performing, and 87% of schools serving the African majority perform poorly. South Africa is ranked 139th in the world when it comes to literacy and numeracy skills of learners at grades 3 and 6. This is carried through from these grades into high school and beyond. But clearly we see that our grade 12 pass rates are very, very poor. The second issue that confronts us is that too few South Africans work. Many more people come into the workforce every year than there are jobs available. This means that young people are bearing the brunt of unemployment. 60% of people who are unemployed have never actually worked a day in their lives. As I speak to you, our official unemployment statistic is 25.7%. On top of that, many workers lack the skills that will help us to modernize this great economy of ours. We have to do something about this. There is no choice. The third challenge is infrastructure. We haven't spent nearly enough on roads and railways, ports, energy, for about a generation. We demonstrated that as a nation we could spend very well for the FIFA 2010 World Cup. But other than that, we haven't invested in big infrastructure. We're building 2 very big power stations now, but we need to invest significantly more, especially in maintaining what we already have. All South Africans talk about the potholes in our roads around the country. Many South Africans are exposed to water schemes that aren't working and such problems. We have to spend money on the maintenance of our infrastructure. The fourth challenge I want to raise is what we call spatial patterns. It's about where people live. Apartheid created massive divisions in settlement patterns between rich and poor. These patterns are still in place today. What this means is that poor people, especially the African poor, live in places that have very few rail links and other forms of public transport. A great many people who don't earn a lot also live very far from where they work. This must be corrected. The fifth challenge is that although we have great resources, particularly plenty of coal, which we can mine cheaply, and we live in a water-scarce country, we need to act in a way that protects our environment. We need to start doing that, given the threat of climate change, not only in our country, but around the world. The sixth challenge is that we have a poorly performing health system. Nearly 1 in 5 South Africans between the ages of 15 and 49 is HIV positive. TB rates are high and unfortunately increasing. Life expectancy has dropped since the coming of democracy in 1994. Improving the quality of life and easing the burden on the health system is a very important objective. But it's not just about more drugs. It also involves behavioral change so that we can reduce the deaths from interpersonal violence and also from abusive driving patterns on our roads. The seventh challenge is the unevenness of the public services. Poor South Africans feel the effect of this more than the wealthy do. And yet they need the services of health, education, social welfare, policing, Department of Home Affairs, very frequently. It's important to remember that the Constitution divides the responsibilities for these things between national and provincial governments, giving the implementation of pro-poor policies like education, health, and social welfare to the provinces. We must find a way of ensuring the evenness of all public services. The eighth challenge that we've raised is corruption. Corruption always robs the poor, and this was one of the reasons why apartheid was premised on corrupt practices. Now, soon after the coming of democracy in 1994, there was very little evidence of corrupt practices. But this ugly animal has raised its head again, and we see it in the awarding of contracts and tenders. We have to deal with corruption to ensure that we can get a proper return on the taxes collected and that we can deliver better services to all the people, but especially the poor. And the ninth challenge that we've raised relates to the divisions that still afflict us. Now, of course, divisions are there in all societies, but they are much too sharp in this country. Divisions between the rich and poor, between men and women, between the unemployed and the employed, between the urban and rural dwellers, between workers and bosses. And then in a country like ours, especially also in respect of languages, we're a complex nation with 11 official languages. We have to find ways to narrow the divides. The National Planning Commission published the Diagnostic report in June of 2011, and also with it an outline for the vision. But this vision must be owned by all South Africans. We've taken the Diagnostic report across the length and breadth of our country, inviting people to share in the observations, to disagree with us, but more importantly, to take joint ownership of the vision. If as a nation we know where we want to be in 2030, then we will share the burden of the journey along the way. That is about nation building. It's about understanding that there are both costs and benefits to be had, but very importantly, we need to act together in our collective interest. The task over the next period will be to move from this diagnostic, the observations about the country, to get to the plan. And that is the challenge before us. We want all of our people involved in the discussion of these matters so that we can build a South Africa that we all understand, whose challenges we understand, and whose joys we will share. Thank you very much for your time.